Welcome to a new episode of the SBE Podcast, the place where we share interesting stories of interesting people. My name is Louis Morgner, and today I'm joined by Professor Dr. Carla Haelermans. Carla is a professor of human capital, educational technology, and inequality at ROA, which is the Research Center for the Labor Market and Education here at the School of Business and Economics. And the focus of her research, among many different topics, is technology in education. Hence, today, the question we want to talk about a bit more is, what will the future of education look like? And we're going to talk a bit about education, the definition, what it means, about a few disruptions, also COVID, what's changed due to COVID, and also a bit about the future, mainly what will change and what can we today maybe say, and just in fear about the future that we may see. So with this in mind, Carla, thank you very much for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, thanks. So let's start off a bit about your personal background. Usually we try to get to know our guests a bit better. So maybe, Carla, can you quickly illustrate your journey to, what you're doing today? I know it's a big question, but where do we start?
Of course I can share about that. And it sounds like an easy question, but it's always difficult when you look back. What I think for me, I didn't realize that doing science, working for university was interesting, doing research. I think until midway my master thesis. Before that, no, I'm never going into research. It's not my kind of thing until I really experienced doing it in my master thesis. And then I thought, but this is fun. If this is research, then it's fun. So that's where the interest, got sparked a bit for doing research. And of course, working at a university, being a professor, it's research and teaching. For teaching, my interest goes back way earlier. I was already. When I was in the student association, it was a dancing association, giving dancing classes to children in primary school via the association. So I kind of, naturally started doing some teaching throughout my life. So that was a natural part of it. If I were to go work at the university and do research and do a PhD. And that I happened to start doing research on education. That was not planned. Like it almost accidentally happened. I applied for a research position at an institute that studied the public sector, and education is one of those sectors. A colleague was looking into health, and another colleague was looking into criminal behavior. All public sector aspects, and I somehow happened to start on a project on education, and I never left. I got hooked on the topic, I got hooked on the sector, and looking back, I think that was somehow meant to be, even though I didn't realize it. But that's how things often go. Like you pick a route, and looking back, it really feels good, but at that moment you didn't realize that. Because I've always, been interested in education and in our educational system. The Dutch education system is an early tracking system, like in a couple of other European countries as well. I remember that I was always very upset when the tracking system when people were put in a track where they didn't really belong based on one characteristic or people's background. So I looking back at my own high school period, I remember really getting upset a couple of times and starting discussions with people on how the system worked. Which in hindsight, things fall in place at that point. Of course, I didn't realize that would also be my future to research that and to look into inequality in education. It did. And even then I started a PhD on this topic of research or education and educational performance and the system, not with the plan to become a professor. Actually, it was never my goal from the beginning. Somehow you gradually, step by step, you get a PhD and you think, well, I really like this research, I want to continue in this. So you get to the next step. Well, now I'm here, I'm taking on more responsibilities. I also if I take all the responsibilities, I want the acknowledgement of the quality of the work I do as well. So now I want to make the next step. And at some point, you're a professor. So that's, it wasn't all planned. I worked hard for it, but it also kind of happened. And it just came as things went.
Yeah, I think also for young people, it's quite interesting to be a bit uncertain about what you do in the early days of your career, but looking backwards, somehow the dots will connect and you kind of trust that process. So I think it's quite remarkable to also see that this played out for you. Also real quick about maybe Maastricht and also the faculty here at SBE. What do you enjoy most about the work that you do specifically here in Maastricht?
Well, it's probably too easy to say everything. It's probably also not true everything, but I mean, I like almost all the things that it. So what I specifically like about Maastricht, so I studied here in Maastricht. I studied economics here at this very faculty, although, Tapijn, of course, didn't exist back then. And then I went somewhere else for the PhD and I came back here. And also coming back was, I'm not going to say an accident, but it also somehow happened without that really being planned. And that made me realize how much I really appreciate Maastricht's system of teaching, of learning, but also the community feeling and just the vibe that the organization kind of sends to me as an employee. How well I fit with this organization, and I only realized that coming back from having worked elsewhere. That's also something you realize looking back at things, not at the moment you make a choice or a decision. I like the organization very much, and so I also really want to contribute. Like I'm a professor, but I'm also at our graduate school PhD director, so I work a lot with, but mostly for PhDs to really improve things there. I'm also related to my chair, the chair of a group of people from different faculties that work on the theme of learning and innovation at UM, and all these things. I really like doing that, working with those people, working on those topics, putting Maastricht University and also the School of Business and Economics more on the map on these topics. So, I think me and the school and university are a good fit, and that really makes me happy about the things I do and I can contribute.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And also I believe that's actually quite a nice segue also to, education, because that's also what we're here to talk about a bit.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, I think education is something we probably use every day and talk a lot about, whether you're a student or whether maybe later in your life you're a parent and you see your children going to school, engaging in education. How would you define education in the first place? Yeah.
Well, first of all, everybody has an opinion on education, right? I mean, when you talk with people at birthday parties, I mean, they talk about the weather, they talk about sports, and they talk about education because everyone has enjoyed education and everyone has an opinion about it, which is interesting and at the same time challenging if it really is your field of work. So what is education? Yeah, I would take it broader even, what is learning? I mean, learning is something we do both formally in schools, but also informally. With everything we do, we learn. And education is in general, a more institutionalized way of offering learning in a structured situation. But learning takes place in so many more occasions than in education. But education, I think if you really take it broad, it's a broad question, of course. But for me, it's the foundation for, education as education system is the foundations for people's life in which they can continue to learn. They start learning in education and they continue doing so, in their later life, in formal and informal ways. But it's a crucial aspect and very important for the development of an individual.
Yes, and also I think then we kind of come back to the concept of a lifelong learner to some extent, which I think is also one of the themes we're trying to follow here at Maastricht to a large degree. When you just talked about also learning from a very young stage, you also mentioned briefly the track system, I think you call it here in the Netherlands, but also different countries in Europe, I believe. I thought of one quote from Goethe, I believe it was, and I'm paraphrasing. It was, if children grow up based on their early indications, we would only have geniuses. And now I'm just kind of thinking a bit about education, especially in the early stage, how it works. What is your view on this track system or on early childhood education in general?
That's a good question. So it's two different questions as well. I think, well, we cannot start early enough with learning. That's of course what we also do as humans. And the learning in early stages is very important. That's very much true. And there is in the informal learning in early years not an equal opportunity for everyone, because you learn informally from your environment, and the environment and the stimulations you get there, they vary very much between children. And there's only so much that a structured education, as in being in school, can make up. So yes, it is good to start learning early, and at the same time I'm a bit hesitant to, you can't take over from birth. So there has to be some point where you formally start, and in the Netherlands it's age 4, so it's people are quite young. At the same time, there are big differences already. So starting early in learning and getting same opportunities in learning is really important. As for the tracking system, I think the tracking increases inequality. But at the same time, I do think it allows to offer more specialized or education at a level that fits better to students. I mean, of course, if you take it even further about the personalized or individualized or whatever you want to call it learning, that goes even further than that. But I think that the tracking is a way of differentiation. I do think we may be tracking a bit too early in the Netherlands. And I also think that with the current system and the way it's done, it doesn't help inequality that was already there in the first place. But in itself, the idea of offering things, at a level that fits a child better than another level, I think that is important also for keeping people motivated and challenging them. I mean, you want, in general, there is this, there's a level someone is at, and then there is basically like a circle around it of a level that someone can achieve but needs to be challenged to. And then, of course, there is the way outside that circle, things that is just a bridge too far at this moment. But you want, I think, as educational system, but also as world in which people learn, you want to challenge people just enough to make them go to a next step and learn, but not try to push too far, because then you don't achieve anything. And that's a delicate balance you have to find, and that's always a challenge in how to be able to do that and what tools you need for that. It's not always the same for everyone as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in other words, also finding your sweet spot between complexity and also not too complex, right? I mean, where do we have the optimal rate on the spectrum, kind of?
And moving along, of course. People develop, and that changes their sweet spot.
Yeah. So with this in mind, I think an interesting question to also think about is, well, if we have education, what makes education good education, perhaps? Or what are methods, characteristics, qualities we should introduce in the learning journey of students or also young children in general? I think we can go in both directions, if it's higher education or high school, primary school level. So what makes education good education?
Yeah. In general and related to what I just said, I think good education challenges people just enough, and also doesn't only focus on the actual content itself, but on how to get there. So it's really to a large extent also about interpersonal skills. It's more important. I mean, there is also this saying, and I'm not sure by who, but it's more important to learn someone to do it than to do it for them, or to give the answer right away. It's often not about the answer, it's about how you get there and what you learn from that process. So good education does that in a way that that motivates people as well. So it's often also not about what exactly you use. I mean, there's different ways of getting there. There's different ways of challenging people to learn and to think about how to approach something. I mean, problem-solving skills is, in my view, the skills themselves are much more important than actually solving the problem in the end, like getting the right answer. That's not the point. Just sometimes it is. But the process of getting there and trying to solve it and trying different ways of doing that and failing regularly as well, but in a safe way, failing. That's a very important aspect of learning, and getting feedback on that too. But it's the goal of what you want to achieve is important, and then the next step is, okay, what is needed for us as a university, for example, to allow students to achieve that learning goal, not the content goal, but the learning goal. So that's a challenge, but doing that in the right way, that makes good education.
Mm-hmm. So without doing too much self-promotion for Maastricht or anything like that, I do think that from my student experience and also, studying here for now quite a few years, that problem-based learning has quite some parallels to what you just described as characteristics important in a good education. I think learning to learn is kind of also a way we could think about that, right? Yeah. Because it's about the self-discovery with students. So how do you think about PBL or problem-based learning in the context of that?
Well, first of all, I agree very much with that. The things that I see and that are also generally known that are important for good education are to a large extent present in PBL. I guess that's also why me and the university is quite a good fit also on how we see things. On the other hand, I do think that sometimes the PBL is taken too literally. So trying to enforce a topic in PBL that doesn't really fit there. A simple example, if you try to solve a mathematical equation, there actually is only one way of doing it right and getting the answer. And you can discuss about that as much as you want, but in the end, there is one way of getting to the solution. But in many, many other aspects, I think that the PBL system really does train those skills in students that are very useful in their later life and fit with this model of what good education is.
I think that's definitely something I can, as a student at least, relate to, and also think, in the end, also depends on the context, on the subject that you're trying to learn. But in general, I think those interpersonal skills, also working in team, finding the right answers, discussing, and even speaking up in a group setting, also that I think can be a very important first step that you learn. Yeah, and
I know that employers really appreciate those skills that, we learn people here at SBE, at UM. And that's more content things. They are relatively easy to pick up on once you're in a job. But these kind of skills, if you have those, that's a really good thing. And I think also, PBL is not the ultimate solution for that. But at this point, I think we are not sure what the jobs of the future actually ask of graduates. So investing in these kind of skills makes you much more flexible also as a employee of the future in whatever jobs ask. So also looking a bit further ahead than just in the short run, I think, these are really important skills to focus on.
Yeah. Let's turn back time a bit. A couple years ago, in the pre-COVID era, everyone came to campus. We had problem-based learning, tutorial sessions, filled lecture halls with all the students, and life seemed, I think, pretty okay for most students with their courses. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit, the pandemic hit, and things had to change very rapidly. And I think we all have experienced that also on a personal note quite dramatically, what this meant, and also how everything had to shift online quite rapidly. And I could see some things also changing for education, obviously. So could you maybe share a bit about the disruptions that we saw from an educational standpoint, and kind of what has changed due to COVID?
Yeah. No, a very good point indeed. Yes, COVID changed everything. I mean, of course, everyone's not talking about there's the pre-COVID time and currently, and then there was this in-between time of complete chaos, basically. I mean, especially the PBL system really, it functions well because of the small group settings, having the discussions in the same room, and then all of a sudden everything overnight had to go digital or being cancelled. But of course, the aim was, let's try to do it differently. And although technology was, of course, already there, but I think there was also some struggle of getting it into the educational sector in general. That's not a university thing. That just goes back from primary education to university. Everywhere there was this, but technology and IT is the future, but at the same time, it's not really much there in educational organizations. And all of a sudden we had to. And that's on the one hand, that was a good thing, and on the other hand, it wasn't at all. So if I look at a lot of my own research on educational technology, technology is not a goal in itself. It should never be a goal in itself. It's a means to achieve something. You have a certain goal in mind of what you want to teach people or what you want people to learn, and then the next question is, okay, what are the tools that I can use to make that happen in the best possible way? And technology is one of those tools, depending on the goal you have. And all of a sudden, that was not the question we asked. The question was, how can we keep things going while the whole world is in lockdown and in crisis, obviously. So I think the good thing is that it really challenged people to think about what technology can do and also showed that to some extent. The bad thing is that it had to go overnight, and what the first reflex is to simply do what you already did, but then in a digital way. And that's the worst choice you can make if you make it deliberately. Of course, we were now forced to do it this way, and something was better than nothing. But at the same time, that's not the best thing to do then, to just do everything you usually did in classrooms, but now do it online. So I think you can use technology in education very much to your benefit as a teacher, as a tutor, as a school. But you really have to think carefully, okay, but what do I use it for? I can really imagine that. And of course, in PBL, there was already a lot of class time with discussions. But that's not the case in all educational sectors. So I can imagine that educators learned how much relatively easy knowledge transfer can actually be done with technology, which saves up class time to actually have those in-depth discussions with students, with each other, but also with you as a teacher. And so that's the second point I want to make. I think that aspect of learning from each other, being in the same room, now being back at campus, the energy that it gives to be in the same room with people, the buzz that goes through the hallways, the students are back. I think we realize the importance of that much more now because of COVID. So I think it learned us a lot. It also learned us how some things should not be done. It also made us appreciate some of the very good things of what we had before. And I think the challenge for the future, to get a little bit already into the ultimate question, is how to balance those things. How to really keep appreciating the good things and keep facilitating them in a way that enables learning in the best, but at the same time make use of those technological benefits or the technological options that we have, been forced to try now, but also been able to try out because of the crisis. It's not all bad in that sense, I would say.
Yeah. And I would totally agree with you with the aspect that you mentioned that maybe a bachelor degree, even in the first place, of course, it's about the content, the formulas you use, and all the other things that you might learn in different courses. But another component that is, I think, at least equally as important is really this social interaction, the people around you, the peers that you get to know, but also hand in hand with that, of course, the interpersonal skill development. So the things that you just learn by working with people. And this is very hard to emulate in a complete online setting. So I think we're all very grateful to be back on campus.
Yeah.
You, however, mentioned, I think, already a very relevant point, which then is, okay, how can we balance maybe what we appreciate right now, what works well, with the new capabilities that we sort of also get from different technologies that are emerging. And I think then the notion of technology-enhanced learning is where we kind of leave off from, I think. So what is your take on that? So technology-enhanced learning, in other words, is it a good thing? If so, what exactly is a positive change in that? What can we really use?
Yeah. I think that technology-enhanced learning, it can be a good thing, but I don't think it should be enforced on everyone or every course per se. So I think that the basis should be, if we think about courses, what is a course about? What do we want to teach the students? Or what do they need to know at the end or have learned in skills? And what is the best toolbox that we can use to offer them that, and the best toolbox we can kind of give them to go through the journey themselves? And in that toolbox, I think in many cases there is some technological aspect, but not per definition. And the how much of that really varies, I think, by what ultimately the learning goal of a course or of a task or whatever is. And so it, I mean, the options kind of increase. The number of options of how we do things, how we offer things, makes it also more complicated. I mean, you have to really think carefully about those options, and can I use it, and does it make things, at least equally good, but it has other benefits, or better than what I'm doing now? And if the answer is no, then it's great that there's technology, but in the end, it really has to be a good mixture of those. So I'm absolutely a fan of technology-enhanced education, and I really think that we, in general, can benefit a lot from using more technology in education, but not because of using technology, not because it's there because we have the option, but because it can really enrich the experience and can, to some extent, depending on what you use and how, also relieve the pressure on the educating side. So yeah, pick and choose wisely how it really adds something to what's already there, in one way or the other.
Yes. Well, this kind of just sparked in me while you were talking about the points that you were making with technology is also the aspect of personalization. Because if we look at, I mean, maybe PBL and the way we have education at Maastricht is not the best example, but if we look at maybe high schools, we have a teacher in front of the classroom with 20 to 30 students perhaps sitting in that room, all learning at the same pace. And with technology, I believe one huge benefit that we, in theory, could grasp is a more personalized learning rate and journey based on your own inherent curiosity to some extent. So where do you see this personalization topic in this debate?
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you that technology really has the possibility to generate that. And I think it could be used much more for that even. So there is a lot of, let's indeed talk about high school, because with the PBL system we have at SBE, it's a little bit different because the groups are already smaller, and that has a different function as well, right? The social aspect you just mentioned, I think, is also a very important function of this PBL group. But in larger classes and learning in high school, I think technology can really play a big role in stimulating students to learn and in motivating students and in taking taking things out of the hand of the teacher. So if And that opportunity of education or of technology really isn't used enough. So we know from research it's highly effective to do it in that way, in an individual way, that students really learn at their own pace, at their own topic. If they go through it faster, that they have other challenging assignments, and if they need more time, then they just stick at a certain level or even do a step back to keep that motivating element. So we know that it's really effective for people to learn. And it generates, on the other hand, also because it's technology, it generates a lot of data, information that a teacher could use to take it to the next step. So I don't think solution in itself, or technology in itself, is a solution there. It's a contribution to a system that is maybe functioning in a bit different way than the more traditional classroom teaching. But it generates a lot of information as well that allows the teacher to also take the next step on what to explain more in depth to whom, and how to let people learn from each other. The risk there is that everyone works so individualized that the benefits of working together, explaining it to someone else, doing some group work, dealing with some unwanted behavior of team members, because that also happens, those kind of things have there's the risk that they get lost if you all work individualized. So I think it can really contribute a lot, again, if it's used in balance with the socializing aspect of education, and if it really can also enrich the teacher to take the whole learning to a higher level. And I think it can, but a lot of those tools that exist are not used to that full opportunity yet. The interesting thing, we're at the start of that, so I can't say anything about the results yet, but we're actually at the start of a project to really, with the educational sector, start working on this. What would these technological tools need to look like to make them being used to their full extent by the students, but also by teachers and schools? And also optimizing the algorithms behind them such that it really functions in the best possible way, that it fits in the system, that we have. It won't all become digitalized. Of course, during the lockdowns, the school closures, those tools were, the increase in use was huge. And something is better than nothing. At the same time, I also know from our research that students aren't always the best decision makers in what they do in such a tool. So the algorithm is also needed to keep people, that they actually make progress and keeping them motivated. So there is still a lot of work to do. Nevertheless, the tools that are out there, research already showed that they are effective. So I think, there's a world to win there still, even though we're already a few steps into that world.
Okay, so to make the future of education a great success, our job is to practice balance, in a sense?
Yeah.
Or would you extend that?
It starts with practice balance, but I think, technology, it doesn't sit still, right? It's continuously being further developed, and it should be. So it's, yes, finding balance is one thing, but also I think, not thinking only about the current situation, but kind of thinking freely about the could-be situation, because with this continuous development of technology, I'm convinced that they're already a few steps ahead. So if we think about what the future should be, how we should want to use technology in education, chances are that it's already being developed, and if not, it should be. But we should steer that more. Right now, the educational sector is often a user of what's being offered. I think we should also be more in charge. This is what we need. So it's balancing, but from a more demanding perspective, I would say.
I think that's quite a powerful takeaway. Also thinking about the developments we see in general in the, I think you could call it industry, right, of ed tech.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
One last thing I'm very curious about to ask you is the following. What are you most excited about when you think of the future of, in brackets, education?
Wow, especially the in brackets. That
Yeah,
makes
that
it like
makes it
the
hard, I
broadest
know.
question ever. Well, what I really, I love the sector that I study, and I love seeing people learn and seeing them learn better with support of systems, teachers, edtech, etc. But I also see the struggles of learners, and the demands that life more and more puts on young people. That just increases by the year, basically. So the future of education, or the future in general, how education can contribute to that, is really to make life a bit easier. To learn a lot, but as really support in someone's life journey. I think that's what education should do. And future, in general, without technology, doesn't exist, in my opinion. So education should be part of that already, and try to be a few steps ahead, such that people are much more prepared for their future.
Awesome. Well, Carla, thank you for also sharing, that takeaway to that very broad question. But nevertheless, I think it was quite nice kind of creating a frictionless future and also making education work for the people and not against it in a sense. So with this in mind, I would like to thank you very much for taking the time and sharing a bit about the work you do and also about the things you think about. So with that in mind, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. My pleasure.
And to the people listening, I'm excited to welcome you back, of course, to a new episode very soon. Again, you can find the episode on Spotify as well as YouTube or your other favorite podcast app. And with that in mind, thank you very much and enjoy the day.